Well, it's great to be here. It's still eye-opening for me growing up at a certain era when I went to my first game in, oh gosh, probably 1963 or 64, when it was just men you saw playing ball. So this conference is very inspiring. I wanted to start out before I get into my presentation and share my baseball story with a quote I found just a few days ago. I was very excited to find it. It's from this wonderful writer, Annie Dillard. A baseball weighted your hand just so and fit it. Its red stitches, its good leather and hardness, like skin over bone, seemed to call forth a skill both easy and precise. On the catch, the grounder, the fly, the line drive, you could snag a baseball in your mitt where it stayed, snap, like a mouse locked in its trap, not like some pumpkin of a softball you merely halted with a terrible sound like a splat. You could curl your fingers around a baseball and throw it in a straight line. When you hit it with a bat, it cracked, and your heart cracked too at the sound. So I had an opportunity to share an experience with 70 plus other women in 2003 in Tucson, Arizona, where we played in a 24-hour benefit game. If you remember that this is 20 years ago now, almost 21 years ago, in 2003, just for orientation, it was the start of the Second Iraq War. Um, the Supreme Court had, at that time, uh, reinforced affirmative action. Venus Williams was defeated by her sister Serena at Wimbledon. And right now, that seems like a long time ago. Uh, when I see particularly the progress that's been made in women's baseball. But in 2003, I was playing, as Jessica said, for the Eastern Women's Baseball Conference. I had been playing softball and I heard about this league, and I was in my 40s and was really excited to fulfill my dream of playing baseball. So Rob Novotny on your left was vice president of American Women's Baseball League, and he was going around the country to the cities where there were women's leagues. At the time, I was pretty oblivious, to be honest, of the leagues. I was just out there to play, but there were leagues in the major cities in the U.S. And Rob had this kind of crazy idea, inspired, I think, by a personal goal and his involvement with the national team for having a kind of a baseball festival, which ended up turning into this marathon game. In addition to Rob, there was Kate Titus. Kate was on the played in the Women's World Series in 2003. She was injured and lived in Tucson at the time and took care of a lot of the logistics for this event, which in retrospect was kind of evolved. There was no real structure for doing this kind of event. So it evolved over time and was really put together fairly quickly. I think our group was visited in September of 2003, so probably just a little over a month before it was going to happen. The event was publicized as, again, a benefit game. The other most important thing going on, too, in Africa at the time was the AIDS crisis. And 70% of the AIDS incidences of AIDS were in Africa at the time, and a particular problem was mothers transmitting HIV/AIDS to their children. So this was connected to a group called U.S. Doctors for Africa, who were going to send doctors over to make a difference in the lives of some of these women and children. So there was a press release. We had media coverage for this event. Nancy Haggerty found out. She was living, I think, in Pawtucket and connected with a group of women who played baseball. She was a writer for the New York Times, so we had an article published there in the Times. And there were also local papers that covered the event around the country and in Tucson. Some of them tiny little pieces, others a little bit larger. So that was going on as we were getting ready to go here. Let's see. Oops, I skipped over. So when the players were approached with this, this was a huge mix of players. In these leagues, you had a mix of people who had never played baseball before, some who'd played a lot of softball, others who were at a higher level and working and playing in teams that traveled, in my case, around the East Coast. I was not one of those players. I think I was a substitute, but I was not one of those high-level players. But you had such a mix of people in these leagues, and those were the people that were recruited to play. Um, what we had to do was raise I was told $750. I think initially it was 1,000. So it was a matter of getting pledges. We had to fund our own travel to Tucson, bring equipment, and in turn, we were provided free room. And a big attraction was a 2-day pro baseball training. Many of us had never had real instruction in baseball in that kind of level. So that was a huge attraction to coming. And then we were also going to be playing in a professional baseball stadium. Just to go back to the fundraising, that was an interesting issue because I know for myself, I hated asking people for money. It was just kind of very difficult for me to do. And I ended up realizing I wasn't going to make it unless I sent out a mass email and a mass mailing. So once I did that, I was really surprised at the response. So many people had never heard of women's baseball, and they were really excited to support this and to support the cause that we were raising money for. There were other players who I spoke to later. One didn't want to ask anybody at all, so she put her own money in. Another, Stephanie Kung, who you'll find out more about later, she went crazy. She did garage sales. She did all kinds of fundraisers, and kind of in keeping with her very extroverted personality, got the word out that way. One other player, Susan Kyle, said she'd get in trouble if they ever found out, but she was working at a pharmacy, and the only way she could see getting there was to ask her customers who had seen her for years. So there was this effort, and I want to emphasize too, this was before social media, so we didn't have the GoFundMe or anything like that to help out. So we all arrived, well, I shouldn't say we all, most of us arrived on Wednesday before the training camp started. We landed at the AmeriSuites Hotel. It was a typical kind of airport hotel. I rode with, I flew out with Jody Brannon, who was one of my teammates on my team, and we got our card key for the room. We got in very late. It must have been at 10 o'clock. Opened the door and found there was one woman in each very small double bed. So it was kind of minor league, I guess, accommodations. And being in our 40s, we decided at that point we were going to get our own room. But most people did share 4 to a room. We also found out that the women from the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League were also staying with us at this hotel. And we ate meals with them, and they were also part of the 2-day training that we took part in. So the training was sponsored by Live the Dream Athletics. I found out later they were compensated for this. I think in many cases, we got reduced, the organizers got reduced rates, or some things were comped. There were sponsors by Thrifty Car Rental, the AmeriSuites, and also Red Bull, which was very important for us. That Red Bull was one of those sponsors. But this training was serious training, baseball training. We had sliding, space running, pitching, infield, outfield, catching, the whole gamut. The Live the Dream Athletics was headed by Kevin Burns on your left there, and he was a minor leaguer who got up to AA with the White Sox, and he had a number of his cohorts in the minor leagues who came and supported this effort. On your right, you'll see John Denny, who was a Cy Young Award winner with the Phillies. His son was part of this Live the Dream. So John came and gave us a motivational talk and talked a lot about Mike Schmidt, who was one of his favorite people. Anyway, that was a lot of fun. It was a great experience. My impression too is that these young men that were training us were a little bit surprised at our skill level, that we did not throw like girls, as they, quote, throw like girls. And they were took it seriously and very supportive of us throughout. Now, what was key to this event were the participation of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League players. I actually don't have the names of all of them, but Lefty Lesko was played with us, and we had Ann Meyer, and I have a couple more names I can get for you. But they came out, and it was just an inspiration to see them and interact with us and participate in the training as well. The Japanese players were key. These were women that had financial sponsorship in a way that we couldn't have imagined. And they had tremendous skill level and discipline. And they kind of blew us away with how they did the drills, the outfield drills, every drill that they went through. But that they just were high level players. So the scene of the game was Tucson Electric Park, which was at the time the home of the Tucson Sidewinders, which was the AAA franchise for the Arizona Diamondbacks. The training fields were fields of the Chicago White Sox and also the Arizona Diamondbacks as well. So for many of us, or probably all of us to some extent, the quality of the fields and the facilities were just first rate. And there was a lot of excitement, at least for me. I just remember what it was like to play on a field that was that groomed, and I can see little spots in it now, but at the time it felt perfect to me. It was lovely. The stadium was actually owned by Pima County, and they donated the stadium to us for the event. So there was no charge for that at all. We had access to the locker rooms and the batting cage. We actually let a man in the locker room. This was the father of one of our players, Stacy Brownwith, and it was just sort of being steeped in baseball in so many ways as people from all over the country came together. They lived in the Chicago area, maybe a little north, and they had been a host family for Dontrell Willis when he was coming up. And actually, she had Dontrell on the PA during our 24-hour game give us a little good luck message. And that was actually during the first game of the Marlins-Yankees World Series in 2003. So that tells you how old this is. If the World Series started on October 18th. So as for the game itself, as I mentioned, people came from all over. We had all told 72 players from 18 states and 3 countries. The players' ages ranged from 12 to 67. 12-year-olds, the 12-year-old was April Poe, who was, I tried desperately to get in touch with and wasn't able to, but she came with her mom. Actually, her mom drove from Alabama all the way to Tucson to participate in this game. So you had just an incredible range. The 67 was Janine Lesko, who ended up helping out with the pitching in the 24-hour game. So having had this training, we were divided up into 2 teams, given a T-shirt. They were the African Graybirds, were the white, and we were the Red-Eyed Knights. I was on the Red-Eyed Knights. And there was all the kind of the accoutrements of an important game. We had the ceremonial opening pitch. Ted Alamayu of the U.S. Doctors for Africa threw that out. We had an announcer throughout the game. There were bands playing, so there was music. It was a little bit of a festival atmosphere. We did not have fans in the stands, except for friends and family and the men from the Live the Dream training. There may have been, I think there were a few reporters, but that was the one thing we lacked that the World Series had. In terms of the lineups and how the game was played, the lineup logistics, we had we played in shifts, basically 4 2-hour shifts. And as you see, some of the younger folks they're doing their homework in the locker room in between their shifts. But it was quite an experience, and the amount of energy was tremendous. This artifact I have is one of the few that I kept. Unfortunately, I had this big folder that I threw out, and it told me, what is it? The question, if in doubt, throw it out. I'd say if in doubt, save it, because I sure wish I had more left over from that game that I kept. So we went through dusk and dawn. The field was regulation, except for the pitching mound. It was moved. The rubber was moved up a little bit to facilitate more strikes being thrown. That's Janine Lesko, who was managing our team, the Red Knights. And here's a view from home plate towards the end of the game. You'll see we had umpires. Those were volunteers from men's leagues in Tucson who came to umpire the game. So I wanted to revisit this game 20 years later and contact players who had participated. To me, this was one of the most important, or was the most interest to me. What was the impact of the game on these women, and what were their memories of the game? Maya Weinstock on your left was and is a science journalist. She had the dream of becoming the first woman to play Major League Baseball. And all of a sudden, I realized I was not the only one that had that idea. And she fulfilled at least the dream of playing in the 24-hour game. Susan Kyle on your right, for her, she said it was something she always wanted to do. When she was younger, she was throwing in a park, and a coach came over and saw her playing. She says, not sure if he knew I was a girl, but he wanted to recruit her team. And Susan's mom said, no, boys and girls don't play together. So like a lot of us, Susan got the chance to play baseball a little bit later in her life. Jody Brannon, I talked about Jody before. Jody was as she said, I wanted to play a game with a ball that fit in my hand. She was a reporter for the Seattle Times in the 1990s. And around the time that the WNBA was founded, there was an effort to form women's leagues in that area. And she said there was a big tryout that she covered for her newspaper. And when she went there, she said it was both affirming and sad. Sad in that there were many women in their 60s who came, older women who had never had that opportunity to play at all. So she said for her, this was a bucket list. I don't know if she had it on her bucket list or it became a bucket list, but this experience was that. And one of her proudest memories is that she got plunked by a ball line drive. I think she was pitching, and some guy came up to her and said, you are tough. So, and she had a bad Achilles that whole time. Jen Hammond is another person I wanted to highlight here. Jen was a 21-year-old student at George Mason University. She had to get out of a history exam to go. She said she was very shy, and she talked a friend of hers to going. So he went with her just to support her. And she said once she started playing, she started relaxing and realizing that she belonged. And what made the biggest impression on her was the skill of the Japanese women. And what's interesting about Jen is she's never had a job outside of baseball. She's an associate baseball coach at Thomas Jefferson High School in Falls Church. And she is also an assistant coach with the Alexandria Aces of the Cal Ripken Collegiate League. So she's living it. She's living baseball. Kimberly Wagner. Kimberly is deaf, and she said this was a huge confidence builder for her. She had also just lost her father shortly. Well, I guess it was a few months before this event, and she ended up going. Her family went out to support her, and basically it just took her out of her depression to participate in this. And Kimberly had the best sense of humor imaginable. And she's one of her proudest moments was hitting the ball all the way to the wall in left field. Didn't quite get it out, but almost. There was also a theme in terms of talking to the women I interviewed of the importance of or noticing the male support. I know for myself, I could only hope that my brothers would join a team and I could support them in playing baseball. This was a role reversal to have men out there supporting us. And that was something that talking to the women and their experiences that was very important. And to a person, the women I interviewed said that connecting to the women of the AAGBPL was incredible experience and inspiring. Jen Gully, the quote from her, she's the woman in the middle and that lower, the photo on the right. Stephanie Kung, I mentioned her to you before. She was a single mom with two twins. She went to the game. She kept in touch with Janine and crashed one of their meetings when she was up nearby for a wedding. And Stephanie is amazing. She had just started learning baseball, and this game launched her into playing in international tournaments, national tournaments, and she's now realized her dream of being I guess part of the park police for the state of New York, and is in retirement. Amy Love was another player. She came actually in part as a journalist because she had her own online magazine to cover to cover women's sports in a way that she thought wasn't being covered at the time. And she just felt she has a even more detailed backstory about fighting for equity that I unfortunately don't have time to get into now. But You can see here, she's with her daughter who now plays Little League Baseball. One of my favorite quotes was from Dorothy Staub, who grew up, of all things, learning to play baseball in Switzerland with a bunch of expats. Anyway, she was a kid there in Switzerland playing pickup ball. And as she said, it was baseball. It was fun. It was just fun. And Cecilia Tan was also there. Sorry she can't be here today, but Cecilia had given a presentation on this in 2004 at SABR, a poster presentation she won an award for. And if you want to know more on the ground what it was like, she has this great blog where she basically has a journal of what occurred during the 24-hour game. So it's a really great way to get up close and personal about her experience. So in terms of my sources for this presentation, fortunately, I never threw away my emails. So I had tons of emails, interviews I conducted with women from the game and also the organizers, and Janine Lesko. Also I had new access to newspapers. Leslie's book I discovered very late in the process, unfortunately. And then Cecilia generously shared her poster session information with me. And these were, I want to thank all these women and one man who I interviewed for this presentation. And I just want to end on, I kind of had a more blubbery journal entry when I got back from this game. I just wrote in my journal, I'm in love. Basically, I was in love with the experience of being with all these women and it was just like this immersion in baseball. And I think the fact that I just had not experienced anything with that intensity around baseball just made it, and baseball was my first love. So it was unforgettable. And I wanted to go back and revisit it. So gone over, sorry. Thank you so much for your attention, and hopefully I can answer a few questions, and I'll put that link to Cecilia's blog in the chat as well.
Thank you, Cathy. Maureen asked, what were the long-term effects of this experience on your life?
I think for me, it's funny because I think for other people it had more of a longer term you know what, I shouldn't say that. I always felt that I got back, and I remember somebody I was working with said, you need to get back down to earth and to reality. And I thought, no, I kind of like this reality. And I didn't know how to really, what to do with it or how to pursue it. But I did later on in 2019, I was recovering from breast cancer. My brother took me to spring training. I ended up just pursuing baseball. I went to the fall league. I found out about Take the Field. I got to go to Take the Field, which is the Major League Baseball initiative to get women jobs in the game. I had an interview. I got really close to getting a job. And so now I've kind of moved into researching it. I guess I wish I could play more at this point in my life with a bad shoulder. I just a few little pickup games, but I guess it did have an effect. Come to think of it, I did pursue baseball later on, and it gives me so much joy. That's all I can say.
I think a lot of people watching and in the chat are resonating with that feeling. Do you keep in contact with anyone? I know you reached back out 20 years ago, but do you keep regular contact with anyone that you met?
I hadn't, and Jody, I did, but it was kind of periodic. She's up in Seattle now. She used to live in DC, and there's some of the women I interviewed now I'm in touch with. I told them I'm going to give them this presentation, and I know they were excited to be contacted. So I anticipate more, and I'm thinking, maybe around the anniversary we'll do something. But there's still so many I would love to talk to about this as well.
Absolutely. Anyone else have any questions for Cathy before we move on? As always, you can put them in the chat and I'm sure Cathy will see them there. Thank you again for sharing your story.
Okay, thanks so much.